Hi, Catherine. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing today, Rod?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thank you for taking the time to join me and all of us. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate your early wake up here.
That's all right.
It's
All right.
global chat.
Exactly. Where are you in your? Are you in Planetwood Studios at the moment?
I am at Planetwood.
Wow. So that is, if I understand that correctly, that is in your house. Is that correct?
It is, and I feel like I should get back a little bit so that my chin is not quite. um, yeah, around 2016, I just knocked out the entire back of the house and redid it with full commercial studio construction and double walls and the whole shebang.
Wow. You make it sound very easy. You just knocked out the back of the house. I presume there was it was quite difficult.
It was partly difficult because they accidentally knocked down more walls than they were supposed to. And so that that had to be rectified. But it's one of those things with any kind of construction. There's always something. It always takes
Sure.
longer than you think, and there's always something. But I'm so pleased with how it turned out, and it's by far my favorite workspace I've ever had. It's very quiet, and I have zero ear fatigue, and it's really actually it was ear opening, eye opening, ear opening, going from different spaces over time. Where you have to kind of close out whatever fans or whatever noises are in the background, but when I did this, I actually created a machine room. I ran all the wires underground. I designed it myself, so everything is as I like it, which is very quiet. So
Yeah. When you say ear fatigue, it's a really interesting term, and it's one I always wonder about with producers and engineers. So what do you when you say ear fatigue, what do you mean, and how do you avoid?
sure, a number of ways. If you've been listening for a long time, your ears can get tired, and it also works that if you've been critical listening, like especially with mastering, but really anything where you're doing the nitpicky, where you really have to listen, um, you can kind of strain. It's just like your, eyes. You can
Mm,
strain your eyes if you don't put your glasses on or whatever the case may be. So ear fatigue can happen, especially if you don't give yourself ear breaks. And yeah, it's definitely something that listening at. I don't like to listen at very loud levels.
mm.
Um, I'll save that for if I'm doing something pop oriented and I just need to hear a blast, just to make sure that it's going to be good loud. But I don't work loud at all.
Okay.
And I always wear earplugs. I'm like the weirdo at the movie theater that has earplugs in because they're like uh, the movies can be so loud, you know. Um,
I wear earplugs at gigs, but I've never heard of wearing earplugs in the cinemas. That's so interesting.
yeah, it can get quite loud, especially if I'm working a lot and I just I want to get out, or I'll wear earplugs a lot actually, just to give my ears a break. And even regular stuff can be too loud sometimes, so
Right.
you just kind of got to give it a break.
Well, I guess your ears are one of your most precious assets,
they,
so you
they are my assets.
gotta
That's
protect
my asset. So I
them.
take as good a care of my ears as I can. So
Yeah, nice. So, in terms of Planetwood, when did that become a goal for you? Was it something you'd always hoped to do, or did it just appear over time?
that's sort of a funny story because I was an art major, first of all. So my background is in like painting and drawing, and I have a bachelor's degree in art, and I started I started writing songs and then getting into engineering a little bit when I signed up with ASCAP, my PRO. So like you guys have APRA.
Yep.
Um, I signed up with ASCAP in like I want to say like 1999, 2000, like a while ago. And
Yeah.
they, for the publisher side of things, they said, figure out a unique publishing name for yourself. And I just came up with Planetwood Productions. Like, I was like, nobody's going to have this. And it was available. So I don't know what there was like zero, it just seemed like a good idea. And this is almost like the internet's barely happening. Like there isn't,
Right.
planet. I don't know where I came up with that, but I managed to keep the Planetwood production side is kind of my record label side and also my ASCAP publisher. And then I also have Planetwood Motifs as my BMI publisher. And then Planetwood Studios is now like the LLC that has both of those. And it's evolved.
Right, right. It's an empire.
Yeah, yes. a mini empire.
And you did your background, and you have such an interesting path and an interesting career journey to this point where you're at today, and starting out in that graphic design sort of world. But you were also performing, is that right? You'd started to write songs, and you got a guitar. Were they sort of your early ambitions?
I taught myself my junior year in college. I bought myself a guitar for my birthday, and I just really wanted to play. I didn't know anything about, I didn't, it was just something I just wanted to play. And so I taught myself, I like Delta Blues. I don't know. I would rent these like instructional videos from the video place. Maybe it was a music store actually, but anyway, they never got their tapes back, unfortunately. I probably owe a pretty big late fee on that. Yeah, I just kind of started on that route. And then, the late 90s happened with like the girls with guitars. So like Sheryl Crow and the whole Sarah McLachlan thing. I was like, oh, this appeals to me. Okay. So I like started playing, and the minute that I could sing and play at the same time, I started writing songs. And I was like, oh man, like I picked the wrong profession, because I was working in the print department at an ad agency in San Francisco at the time. I was just like, all right, I'm going to not do graphics anymore. And I immersed myself in music, but I never really lined up with performing. I love singing, but the multitasking of playing and remembering lyrics, especially, like I just blank out on that. So never really pursued an independent artist per se side to things, but I apply my songwriting skills to producing.
Yes, yeah, and and I do want to ask you about that, because you have such an interesting career in pre-production, production, and post-production. So I think that's such an interesting thing to discuss. But just before we get to that,
Yeah.
I think another really interesting part of your story is, I believe, did you do an aptitude test that told you instead of music, instead of performing music, audio engineering might be where you should go?
That's right. I when I was living in San Francisco, right after I discovered that I love writing songs, I decided to do this aptitude test called it was the Johnson O'Connor Research Foundation aptitude testing, and they're in all major cities in the U.S. And the sort of net on it is, it turned out that like all my aptitudes are in my ears, and that like my visual memory is not very good at all. It just made a lot of things make total sense. And it also said that, my rhythm, pitch, and tonal memory is in the 90 plus percentile, which is like 1 in 10,000 people according to their statistics. But I was like, oh, that makes like so much sense when you combine that with your actual hearing. Like I get my hearing tested regularly as another sort of keeping track of my assets and making sure everything's okay. But they said that when I had my hearing tested the first time, they're like, your hearing is 20/20 now, which like the equivalent of like 20/20 vision. So they said like when I was a teenager, I would have had like 20/15 vision, like bat hearing basically. Like, and it made everything like really loud actually. Like I know that sounds kind of ridiculous, but
No.
it's I don't think it's uncommon if you especially women for whatever reason, it's kind of a common. I think that's why you see a lot of female mastering engineers actually.
Ah, that's so interesting. Okay.
Mhm.
And so you do that aptitude test, but how do you then get exposed to this world? How do you then go, all right, this is what I'm going to do with that. I'm going to find out about engineering. Was it through performing and recording and seeing it happen, or how did you do it?
Yeah, I basically went from that to setting up a little recording studio in like there was a little room behind the garage at my house, and at the time I was up north, up the coast, and I had like a 4-track, and I just started fiddling, with
Yeah.
stuff, and then I ended up in the studio actually recording a couple albums. That there was a local studio, and basically a friend of mine had an apartment come available in Los Angeles, and I was living up the coast by like 5 hours, and I just basically took over this guy's lease, and like I just moved down to LA with like no job, and and basically I was just like I knew this is where I'm supposed to be. So I basically just came down and took over this lease, which was rent controlled, which was like a must for LA.
Yeah.
And this is 2003. And then a friend of ours has a commercial electrical contracting company, and
Oh,
I just got a job like being an assistant in the estimating department at this commercial electrical contractor for
right.
like a year. I just knew I needed to be here. And then so after a little while, after like a year just doing a regular job, I was like trying to look at schools and like figure out like how do I actually transition into earning a living in music or engineering. And I discovered this school that was at the time called the LA Recording School. It was LA Recording Workshop, which
Okay.
which was transitioning into becoming the LA Recording School, which had just been bought by Full Sail, which is a top engineering school in Florida.
Yeah.
And so I ended up enrolling there, graduated #1 in my class, and got, had a studio find me and
Right.
give me a job.
So you clicked with it straight away. Like you did,
Oh,
you went to that course and just
it was
clicked.
so easy. Yeah, I hate to say that, but like when your aptitudes are working for you, it's not a struggle. It's when it's a lot easier to remember things that you're built to do. So
Right.
like, I think it was like a 98% test average and like 100% attendance. It was just ridiculous. Like I just really enjoyed every minute of it, and it all made sense to me. And it was like, oh, so this is
Yeah.
what it's like when when you're doing something that's, you're made to do. But also it's easy, I think, to be passionate about those things that you're good at,
Right.
and it kind of fuels itself, so it's like you end up having endless energy for these things that you're good at because you're
And
passionate about it. And it
yeah.
kind of, and I remember vividly leaving college after my bachelor's degree. I had taken an opera class, was my last class ever for undergrad or for my bachelor's degree. And I was like, I never have to take another test again. Woohoo! Like I was so, and then a couple of years later, I'm like, I'm going back to school. But it really made sense, for me to do it that way, so that I
Yeah.
could start working pretty immediately, because I had a apartment and all the good things.
Rent to pay. So I think you mentioned the studio found you, and I think was that Play Studios. They were
Yeah.
and So that they were one of the top audio post-production studios for commercials, I
Yes,
believe.
that's
And
right.
it was there that you engineered on the first iPhone commercial and the
Yeah.
I think Get a Mac campaign, huge,
Yes.
legendary campaigns.
Well,
What?
honestly, it makes it easy to go to work every day when you're literally laughing. Like, I was the
Right.
last eyes and ears, like my job, my role, I was the last eyes and ears before those went to broadcast. So I would lay back the audio to picture that would then, that tape would like go to the, broadcasting satellite on a motorcycle messenger, really dramatic. But you're sitting there watching like Justin Long. It's hilarious. Like they were truly, the ba da 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 hilarious. Like, and
Yeah.
so it was a lot of fun, actually.
I imagine an environment like that is very fast paced. You must be there must be tight deadlines. Was that the case?
That's an understatement. Yeah. It's if you think of like the different jobs in the industry, you've got like film would be like the slowest. Going backwards, like TV would be a little faster. And then commercials is like the fastest possible.
Right.
Like, so, we would have mixes come in that day, and then I'd be at the gym later on, and what we had just mixed was on the TV. Like,
Wow.
you're on the elliptical machine, and like there's the Geico commercial that you just worked on, or whatever it was. It made going to family gatherings and having the TV on in the background kind of fun, just
Right.
because I mean, like every other commercial is like, hey guys, I worked on that one. Hey guys, I worked it was kind of fun to be able to point at the TV.
Yeah. So what do you think were the benefits of that as an education, going to a studio like that, for example, as opposed to going to a studio that's just focused on music and producing records and songs? What was the education that you got, do you think?
That's a great question. It was so many facets to it. On the sort of diplomacy side, like you learn how to be diplomatic very, very quick when you have very high powered ad people and producers, and like you learn how to not stick your foot in your mouth like really fast.
Okay.
Um, and learning how the industry works in that area is you don't have any access to it other than in a studio. It is a very, very closed area. So it's very relationship wise, and also the work itself, like it's a very closed area. So that was very interesting to be learning for my first studio experience in that, because it was not just learning how a quick mix happens. And we're talking like many parts of a campaign getting mixed in a matter of hours. Like you learn how to mix really fast, but also it's the way the timeline, like it's set up in a session in a very specific way. And I found that it works really well actually to apply many of my editing skills that I learned there to music. And the
Mm.
other cool thing is, when you sweeten a mix, that's essentially adding what in music would be the mastering factor. So to mix and master, even though it's for television, for broadcast, there are a couple of steps that I learned sort of conceptually that really apply to music. So when you have kind of an ear, you're hearing this, over and over and over again, it kind of gets emblazoned in your brain. But also another cool thing is we had an on-staff composer who was composing all the time in the room next door to me. So it went Studio A, composer's room, my room, Studio B. And so I was listening to the composer nonstop. Like anytime anything came up, he was on like Netflix commercials and AT&T commercials and you name it. Like he was all over the place because anytime a producer would come in and maybe they might have been not 100% happy with the PlayStation music or whatever it might be, the mixer would be like, oh, hey, well, Matt can probably take care of that. Like, or he can
Right.
give you an option, you know? And so oftentimes he'd be in there and like cranking out something like during the mix session to give them an option as an alternate for the music. And within like a year, he went from like driving like a Toyota Camry to like a Lexus, like no joke. Like, no, it was kind of a heyday, you know, in commercials at the time. But it was really quite an education that I still call on.
Yeah. Was that seeing, getting that exposure to that composing? Was that also what then led you to start composing as well? Because you've composed a lot of music for a lot of ad campaigns and for
Yes.
ESP. Was
Yeah.
that
I mean,
your
this,
kind?
you know, this particular composer was primarily a guitar player, and pretty rock based, but also kind of combined orchestral stuff. And it was just really cool to see how he evolved. I mean, I basically took over his previous job, and then he switched over to composing like full time.
Okay.
And so that was cool for me to observe sort of his arc and process. Mine was like total accident though. Like I went I went from being engineering in commercials to refocusing to music, largely mixing and mastering. And then artists started asking me to work with them in a producing capacity in addition to the other things I was doing. And then I took on a production partner, and that's when it just kind of took off. And she was or is a drummer, and we were production partners for like 3 years and just cranked out a ton of music. You know, did an ESPN theme song, like, but that was quite rock oriented.
Right.
But yeah, definitely a lot of that was informed by just what I'd been sort of absorbing like a sponge a
Yeah.
little bit
Yeah.
at the studio.
There was one other experience that I just wanted to quickly ask you about, which I imagine was quite pivotal, and that was working with Matteo Messina, the, who composed works for Juno and Up in the Air.
Yeah.
How did you work with Matteo, and what did you learn from that experience?
What's funny is the person who introduced me to Matteo is Michael Elsner, and Michael was very helpful in basically describing, like, when you're composing for TV specifically, but you're writing kind of more thematically, and it's a very different arc to a piece, especially since it needs to be pretty short a lot of the time.
Mm.
And so he had already really helped me kind of get my ear on how this works structurally and how to create production music, which is super duper different from any other kind of music. And so Matteo was about to go to the Toronto Film Festival for Juno. I mean, he was like, this is the very, very beginning. And so I was just helping him around the studio, and I made him some business cards for the Toronto Film Festival. But yeah, he was just starting with Juno, and I mean, he's sort of credited with the whole jangly guitar, like,
Yeah.
which sort of translated to this ukulele sound in commercials for like way too long.
Right.
But yeah, so that's kind of how that came around.
Okay, so we touched earlier very briefly on the fact that all your skill sets and all your experience has given you exposure to the world of pre-production and to production and post-production and of course composing as well.
Yeah.
How do you think each of those disciplines inform the other? Like, does knowing one help about the other, and do you think that benefits every discipline?
I think that it depends on the person. For me personally, I love all of them, and in order to, in order for me to be competitive here, because LA is incredibly competitive, and it's becoming more so, in part as we're coming out of the pandemic. Um, we're still in it, but it's become an even more competitive field. But I like to say yes to projects. So I have everything from, recently mixing a film to like post production to recording score for a film, which also included two singles that were like sort of like a retro punk but current. I don't know. They're like really cool sounding score, and to working on pop vocal production. Like, I just like to say yes. And
Right.
I mean, I like to be able to do, new things, and call on, my experience to, I don't know. I really enjoy all of it. So it's very helpful to be able to, uh, when I have my producer hat on, if the artist is questioning structure, or if, not, if they're unsure about where something should be in a song or whether it's going to work or not, I can use my editing skills to actually execute it, but then also give my producer opinion based on my songwriting. I don't know, it just all kind of dovetails together. But for some people it's very distracting, and is actually like diluting, whatever their ultimate potential could be. But for
Sure.
me, it's just like putting water on a fire. Like, I'm just like, yeah. So
You mentioned the competitiveness, particularly
yeah.
in like Los Angeles. For someone who is just coming up, or someone who is at the beginning of their journey, what advice do you give them to I guess stand out in a competitive field? Is it, you mentioned that you say yes? Is that a key thing?
um I would say, you know don't be afraid to try new things, because you may stumble on something that you end up being incredibly good at, that nobody else can really do, or like you're just a super niche thing, or it's hard to hard to know. But I really think being yourself is actually like really, really, LA can be a very plastic place,
Hmm.
and I think just celebrating yourself, and what are the things that, like, whatever, you like to do, or whatever you're passionate about, when that lines up with your aptitudes, that's like awesome.
Right.
And I think that's a really strong, helpful thing, because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, then you might not be having, as Joseph Campbell would say, your ladder up against the right wall.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's about passion, isn't it? It means that the long hours, the 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 tight deadlines, you can handle it because it's your passion. It doesn't feel like work, I imagine.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then when you're earning money doing it, it's like, are you kidding me? Like, this is great. I mean, I've had the corporate jobs, I've had I've done the whole thing, and this
Yeah.
beats it. Like, and it's a very peaks and valleys kind of, when you're working for yourself. I mean, I've worked for myself now since, well, certainly the entire time I've been at this location. So the last 13 or 14 years, but even, I've
Yeah.
been working independently for a very long time, and that's not for everybody at all.
Right.
Some people are much better matched, going to a studio and or working for somebody else, or but I managed to really enjoy, um, the way I've got it organized. So
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, I mean, you're clearly very busy. You've got a lot going on, but you also make time to do a lot of volunteering work
yeah.
with various organizations. And Sound Girls being one of them, the LA chapter of the Producers and Engineers Wing for the Recording Academy, the SONA Steering Committee, to name literally just a few of quite a lot of the organizations that you volunteer with.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why is that important to you to be involved with those organizations?
I think it's really important because change doesn't happen by itself. And, I think I'd rather be at kind of the front of the ship, when it comes to making change happen, because, for producers in the industry, as a female producer, I'm in like a 2% slice of the professional community, which is honestly ridiculous. Like, for engineers, I'm in the 5%, songwriters, 12%. These numbers are changing, but not very fast. And I just feel like, when you have visibility, and there's an element of, with Sound Girls, I do mentoring for Sound Girls. With Recording Academy, I participate on committees. With SONA, I help put on events, and I think participating, is really, really important. Not just giving back, but participating in your community. And I don't know. I feel like I get a huge amount back from any time I give to any one of those organizations.
Yeah, with Sound Girls, are you finding that the numbers of female identifying engineers and producers and studio professionals, do you see the numbers growing, that there is more of an interest, or is that has always been that interest, but just not the opportunities?
I think the latter is very true, except it's been very hard to quantify for a long time. And there have been studies recently, the Annenberg Foundation studies especially, but we all know the percentages from any. I was the only girl in my graduating class, and this is like 2005, like, and I didn't think anything of it. Like, it didn't occur to me, to be honest. I mean, it sounds stupid, but like, I was just so focused on the task at hand. The social element, or the gender element, never really occurred to me, which sounds really stupid in hindsight. But being able to shed light on that, and then make opportunity for other girls coming up, I think is really important. But I think that actually during the pandemic, I think that numbers have actually gotten worse.
Really?
Unfortunately, yeah, a lot of people, guys too, have had to get out of the industry. Like, the pandemic was very, very cruel to music. Especially, anytime there was a surge, or anytime there was a variant, or, people would cancel sessions left and right. Even like in the last couple months, I've had people need to postpone sessions, because they have it. And it's just, it's something that the industry is working through, but, for being in a small enclosed space, and, there's that sort of, nobody wanted to be in a space with anybody for a very long time. And some people, that wasn't true at all. It was, they have their bubble, or, whatever they were calling it, where they would all, be in the studio together, and it didn't really matter. But for a lot of my clients are either people I don't know, or, there's an element of being extra careful. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, I wouldn't say it's gotten better, actually, but I'm not 100% positive, but
Sure.
I'm pretty sure it's the numbers have actually gone down.
Right. And how do you think we fix that? I mean, obviously there's campaigns such as Fix the Mix, which you're involved with, and Sound Girls and Jaxsta, but
Yeah.
are there also other visible ways you think that we can address that situation?
I think that, for me, everything is engineering really. And so I see, okay, well, if I'm in 2% and the other 98% are guys, then we need allies. And
Right.
you are an ally right now. Like us having this conversation is a step in allyship, if that's a word. And if you are kindly interviewing me and showing me as an example, and when you have that sort of endorsement, or just shedding light on, hey, here's somebody who happens to be in a slice that isn't very well represented, it really helps, because it's like, oh, there are female producers, there are female engineers, there are female whatever it might be.
Right.
And that old phrase, what is it, you can't be what you can't see, or something
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
I think that's very helpful to some people, to be able to have an example. And I didn't have any examples, but it didn't faze me.
No.
So I feel very fortunate in that regard. But I think there obviously everybody should have a fair shake, and there are so many really talented women around. So
Absolutely.
allies is how we fix it, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
We can all be
Yeah.
friends. We can all work together.
Absolutely.
Hey, it's true.
One of the exciting developments recently for you, which is very recent, I understand, is your appointment to the
Like
recording.
today.
The Recording Academy Board of Governors. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What does that role mean to you, and what does it entail?
Well, at this point, my involvement with the Recording Academy Los Angeles chapter, which most people know as the Grammys, it has been with the producers and engineers wing, on their LA chapter committee. And so that role was working in little subcommittees, and working on different, a lot of it's advocacy oriented, like women in the mix, like, getting this idea of women more involved. And so the Board of Governors is kind of a step up from that, as far as, it's an elected position from my LA chapter peers. And it's, I suspect, I don't know, because this is my first term, but it will be more, advocacy, and really trying to honor, changes that need to be made within the industry. Yeah. And just like the conversation we're having, it's having dialogues with people who are motivated to help change and put the energy in to try to figure it out. It's a lot of just putting heads together, trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah. What does it mean to you, that appointment?
Sorry?
What does it mean to you, that appointment?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, it's a huge honor. I mean, to just join the Recording Academy as a voting member, I want to say like eight years ago, maybe, that was a really big deal for me. Like, that was really exciting to get to vote on who would end up becoming nominated for a Grammy, and then who ends up winning a Grammy. That process was always an honor to be a part of. And as I became more involved with different boards and different organizations, I realized I can do more. And so I just realized that, I would just like to be more involved and give more time. And so it's something that I've hoped to be involved more with, and I'm just pleased to have had to have been nominated and elected, and it and the peer element of it as well. I mean, there's so many good people that are involved, and I enjoy their company also. So
Right.
there's an element of expanding your social group as well. It's not all advocacy per se. It's getting to know people and hearing about their process, and I don't know, I find it very enriching.
Yeah, amazing when you think back to 2003, coming to Los Angeles without a job, without an idea, and not really even being in the industry at that point.
Yeah, right.
To
Crazy.
just 2 decades on, having your own studio,
Yeah.
all incredible credits, and your work with all these organizations, and now, of course, the board of governors with the Recording Academy. It's quite a journey.
It sure has been, and a lot of it is not being attached to the bullseye. Like, I never have. It is a journey, and part of saying yes is sometimes it might take you over this hill or that hill, or up whatever it is, and uh, it really, I've never been very rigid with, well, I want this to happen, and I only want to go this way to get there, and I've never, that has never been my routing.
Right.
Um, so not being too attached to the bullseye has been, and I keep actually exceeding it like often,
Yeah.
where in my mind I would have thought like, oh, it'd be really cool if this happened, and then like something else happens. It's like better than whatever the thing was I thought would be really cool. So, that's where the yes is helpful.
Yeah, I love that phrase, not being attached to the bullseye. I've never heard that before, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just when I think of like when I took archery in like sixth grade as an after school activity, and like there's this idea of like you're really so focused, when you're pulling the thing back, and
Yeah.
it's like kind of dangerous too because it's like sharp or whatever, and like swing, and there it goes, and you get the bullseye, and it's like, yeah, that's a very straight A to B, but
Yeah.
there's nothing really A to B about LA in general. So
That's great. Well, Catharine, you've been so generous with your time. Thank you so much for chatting. I know you've got an event tonight, and I'm sure you've got plenty of work to do with that on that desk behind you and in that studio. So thank you so much. It's been so lovely to talk to you.
thank you for having me, Rod. And I just wanted to say that I really admire what Jaxsta is doing. Just in general with credit. I mean, it's so incredibly important to have these credits available, since they can be very hard to come by,
Right.
um, and so I really admire the work you guys are doing.
Thank you so much, Catharine. That means a lot. We really appreciate your support and your time. And I hope, and I'm sure this won't be the last time we talk. So I look forward to keeping in touch and chatting more in the coming months and years.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Thank, thank you, Catharine.
Rod.
Have a great
Okay.
afternoon and evening. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Bye.